What's up guys, my name is Blob and welcome back to another video on the channel. And we've made it, number 10. This is episode number 10. I'd like to say a big thank you to everyone who voted in the poll on the community tab of the channel. It really helped me with deciding what we were going to do. But quintessentially what I've done is kind of merged the two ideas together in the end. With the way that the spacing on this habitat ended up working out, I thought it's going to be too big for just the one or two lines. So I've ended up just doing the one line habitat and it's going to be an entire pride. And additionally, I would like to apologise if the quality of the footage in the background is a little bit on the lower side. This is some live stream footage that was taken again directly from a stream that I did at the start of the year or around Christmas time. It was around about that sort of time. But I sort of just built this building knowing what I wanted to do with it, just sort of saving it for just the right time in the sanctuary, and it seems like that has now come around. And again, I'd like to apologise for the length of this video. It's going to be a long video, this one. There's a lot to digest and a lot to build, so I could have made it shorter if I sped up the footage, but at the end of the day, I feel like if I'd have sped up the footage any more, it would have just been like going through a black hole and everything would have just been zooming past you so quick that you wouldn't know what was going on. So I've opted for a longer video. If you stick around for the whole video, I appreciate you. If you want to pause the video and come back at a later time, I also appreciate you. However you want to view this episode is entirely up to you. But yeah, this is not going to be like a frequently occurring thing, like a 45-50 minute video, so don't worry about that. Now, I'm almost 2 minutes into the video and I've not explained anything about that is going on in the background. And this is going to be based on a building I used to go past when I was in a previous job, and the bus that I used to get on to get to that work used to go past this building. And I always tried to sort of like get a glimpse at this building as I used to go past, see if I could like grab snippets from it because I always knew that I wanted to sort of build it in Planet Zoo one day, but I just never really knew where I was going to implement it. And then one day I just remembered that Google Maps exists and just found it on Google Maps and took a load of reference images from Google for it. And yeah, so it's basically like a small, I don't know what you'd call it, like a leisure center. So it's like a little area that you put into, and you've got like a restaurant. There's like a hotel, so there's like rooms that you can stay in. There's like a small gym. There's a small swimming pool on site. It's just somewhere that I guess you could just like stop by if you were like, it's because where it's located isn't really like a tourist hub or anything like that. So I wouldn't really say it's like a holiday location. So as to its actual function, God only knows, but it looks like a cool building nonetheless. So I end up building it. And I end up doing something very strange. I start with the roof. Roofing is something that you would probably normally never start with, but I just wanted to get an idea of the scale of the building, and I think the best way to do that was to start from the roof and work my way down. And also, this part of the building is going to be a hollow shell. There's actually going to be nothing in here apart from the initial restaurant building that guests will walk in through the door, and then they'll turn right, and then there'll be like a wing that they sort of go into that you can't see, and then they'll teleport via the restaurant tables to the left portion, the left wing, which is going to be decorated. And yeah, it's going to have the adjoining lion habitat. But like I say, this is just going to be a complete shell, so this is going to be a pretty bare bones building all in all. But I try and get as much detail on the exterior as I can with regards to it. I end up using like the big windows just to help fill up some of the space. The Indonesia stone is still one of my favourite wall/panel sets in the entire game. And plaster I'll just continue to use till the end of time, basically. Some really versatile pieces with some really cool uses in terms of like the fact that they're flexi-color, like most pieces in this game now, to be fair. I do end up putting a garden on the right hand side of this wing, but it kind of is surplus to requirement because once I put it in the sanctuary, the spacing isn't quite right, so I end up just sort of deleting some of it and just merging it in with the existing terrain and foliage work that's over there. This current build is being done in a different sandbox blueprint zoo, just because, again, I didn't want to like end up merging pieces I didn't want to merge, and it's kind of like my playground and test ground for a lot of these builds. I'll go in, I'll sort of like play around with a few ideas, and then once I've got something that I'm kind of happy with, I'll then go back and into the actual zoo, and then I will sort of use that foundation and build what I want to build. this is the same map that I used to build my little pillbox that I used for the cougar habitat. Again, I went into this with a very strong idea of what I wanted it to look like from the get-go. I wanted it to be like a combination of this building that I used to go past when I went to work, and also it was going to be sort of semi-based on the restaurant in the Big Cat Sanctuary in the UK. That has a similar type of premise where you go in, there's like a restaurant or a tea rooms. I think it's more like a tea rooms than an actual restaurant. And there you've got this walkway the lions will go past, and you can see the lions while you sit and basically have your afternoon tea as a true Brit would. But yeah, that was something that when I started this project, I knew I wanted to do something similar to that, like a restaurant you could sit in and watch the animals while you eat. I'll be honest, I'm not sure I've seen too much of it done in the game the way that I've done it. I know a lot of people do like an outside balcony bit where you might be able to view the animals. I did a restaurant before that was called the Red Crown, I can't remember what it's called. But it was based on the Red Crowned Cranes, sorry. And it was an indoor bit, and then you had like a balcony area that you walked out onto, and then there was like the big lake where the cranes used to basically swan around and do their thing. But this one ended up giving me quite a bit of grief with regards to the traversable area. When you see me do the initial walkway next to the window, I genuinely thought that it would be good and fine and traversable for the line, but it turns out that it was just not playing ball whatsoever. I don't know whether it was like some foliage that was like being a pain, whether it was the fact that the barrier was so close to it and it wouldn't go near the barrier within a certain perimeter. God only knows. But yeah, the managed to get it figured out in the end, thankfully, and it works. And this will be kind of like a part 1 of 2 of this whole kind of line build. The restaurant is now going to be considered done, or the interior part. I'm going to do a little bit of detailing on the back where the keeper area is for the lion, but the rest of the lion habitat is still going to need doing. I really wanted to get the window viewing portion done, but I think I'm going to end up doing the larger scale lion habitat where they'll be able to like go out into their yard in another video. But like I say, that's going to be another time, and I'll have a bit of time to think about what I want to do for that to make it unique, because I want each of these habitats to be different in their own right and not just copy and paste of one another. Speaking of copying and pasting, you will see me copying and pasting the cougar building and the retaining walls that I use over in that section over here. The main reason for that being, if the sanctuary was to basically recruit a company to build this stuff for them, and regardless of whether this being a older or a newer build in the sanctuary, if they've had work done by them and it was good and it was at a reasonable price, there's no reason why they wouldn't use those same contractors again to build the same thing if they know it works. So things like retaining walls, I have obviously like reused in other places, because if the sanctuary was happy with the work, like I say, they would reuse the same contractors. Now, the name above the door here is kind of like a little nod to my UK folks. If you know, you know. Wetherspoons. It's sort of like the watering hole for the cultured, let's just say. It's a place where you can go and get like really cheap booze and really cheap food, and I don't know, it's quite a nice social experience, quite in all, like a Wetherspoons. If you ever visit one from outside of the UK, it is quite good. I'll be honest, I'm a fan of the old spoons. But the name isn't something that sticks, and in the end we do end up changing it. I end up going with the Lion Inn, but again, I think I'm going to change that name, because this isn't going to be like an inn in the traditional sense where you can get food and also get like somewhere to sleep. So I think I'm going to end up changing that name, because the term inn isn't theoretically correct when building this. But if anyone has any names, I'm more than happy to take name suggestions for things like this. This bit here, I remember watching it back now, I have PTSD from this whole thing. This was horrific to try and build. When you're trying to work with these like eave pieces for the corners where the roof sort of meets at the angles, it is just awful to try and work with. And then ultimately, I think I end up just like ripping this wall apart and starting again. Because I just think I end up taking a plaster piece out and just end up making it like the solid Indonesia stone wall pieces, because it was a lot easier to work with than having all these like different textures on a side of the building that you're really not going to be seeing because it's going to be covered with foliage. So this bit I end up just mucking around and spending too much time with. Speaking of mucking around and spending too much time with, this section afterward, I believe, is where I start placing the garden area on the side. Yeah, you can see me placing these like concrete pieces here and filling it in with the mulch pieces. This was completely pointless. Like I say, this is just like retrospectively me. I just thought I had somewhere where I wanted this to go, but in the end, it just didn't really work out how I wanted it to. So yeah, this is kind of pointless, but you know, it's a nice little segment of me gardening nonetheless. But then I do start going into some detailing bits. I start putting some grunge on the underside of the guttering pieces. Underneath the overhang of the roof, I use upside down saltworts, the pale like dry variants, to act as like a bird nest. Don't know whether birds would sit up there, or maybe it's even like a wasp nest. I don't know. You could argue for either, but it was just a little detail in that section that you wouldn't normally see, I don't think. So it just helps fill up some of these like weird little gaps that you end up getting here. So yeah, you see me using like the dry saltwort just to clump up in that corner. And this is probably one of the easiest roofing jobs that I've had as well in quite a while, which surprises me because obviously the roof is on multiple levels. Like looking at this here, you'd think that this would be quite an awkward roofing job, but I don't know. I think there's something about like not building on weird, awkward angles that really helps with the whole process. And then here I'm just like copying the front side and then copying it over to the rear side. This rear side, like I say, this will just be like a small paved area where staff buildings will be. We've got the swans that need like keeper buildings and a staff room, and then all the staff that are going to be like in this area for the lion habitat, as well as the people who actually tend to the restaurant are also going to need somewhere to visit in order to recuperate. Now I end up changing the name here like you see me doing. I end up using like a screen, and then I spend too much time in Canva making a screen for it. Basically, I've decided that I don't really like the fonts that are in the game. Like, they're either too large or they're too small. There's no like happy median in terms of the fonts in this game. And as much as I appreciate the work that people like Ricey do in terms of making their fonts, it's quite piece count heavy just for like individual letters. So in the end, I end up just going with a board here and then just sort of constantly changing it. And I don't know, I feel like it's not so much worth the effort that you put into it a lot of the time because of the saturation on these signs. You see the first iteration that I put in here is like way too bright. So I end up like going into Canva again, changing and putting like a filter over it to change the brightness. And I end up doing this about 4 or 5 times before I end up getting something that I'm semi-happy with. And even now, I don't think I'm going to end up sticking with it. I'll end up changing it, the name, and that means I'll have to redo the sign again. Happy days. And then in the background, I'm just copying the front section over to the front section. This rear section is just going to be flat. The bit at the front kind of has like a bit more character to it. You can see it's got like the overhanging, I don't know what you call it, like awning. And then you've got the pillars that sort of help keep the building up as well. But this rear bit is just going to be like flat. It's going to have a door, and then I might build like a slight canopy type thing coming off the rear of the building, but nothing too spectacular for this rear bit. And the left-hand wing, when I come to do it, left-hand when you're looking at it from the front, by the way, I wanted it to be at an angle. I didn't want it to just be like a flat building. I just wanted it to have like a bit more dimension to it. But I say this, I realized that this building looks like it was made by an architect who only had a ruler to hand. So a lot of straight lines, I understand that. So I just wanted to like add a different dimension and just sort of change the angle that the left wing came out of. You could even maybe argue that like this left-hand side, you could make it like an extension in the lore, like it's a part that was added at a later date, whereas this original building was maybe one that was there as part of Broadmoor Farm. But in a moment, you will see me basically selecting this whole build, blueprinting it, and then going and putting it in the sanctuary. And then that's when I realized that the garden on the far side isn't really going to be that sort of, it's going to be a bit pointless having it. And then here, I'm just like mucking around with the restaurant building. Originally, I wanted the restaurant building to be directly as you came in the front of the building, but where the roof sort of clips in, it showed through the roof. So I ended up having to like rotate it and put it on the right-hand side portion. So I think I'll end up just putting these staff buildings in this like middle section if I can fit them in. If not, I'll just build a separate building for them. It's no big deal. But the restaurant's in, and that is going to be the part that makes this whole building kind of function as it should be. And speaking of functioning as it should be, the cheetah habitat is well under its rework, and I'm pretty much almost done with it. I was working on it a little bit on the stream the other day, and it's pretty much sort of like 80% there. The only thing I need to do now is redo the indoor area for them and sort out where you will be able to do your meet and greets with the actual cheetahs themselves. But yeah, everything's sort of like coming together quite nicely. It's all being tied together. We're getting to a point now where with the sanctuary where, so this area where the restaurant has been placed, this is basically sort of like a mini guest hub type thing. So on the left there, like just out of frame, is the gift shop, and then there's a ramp and stairwell that goes up behind the gift shop, which takes you up to Dummel Tower, and then Dummel's Tower is where like the cheetahs will be on the left hand side. So it's all tying together quite nicely, because obviously then the cheetah habitat is viewable from two sides. You've got the open area behind the gift shop, and then you're going to have the glass wall that you'll be able to see them through as you're working your way up toward the Amma leopard and what is going to be the sort of mini botanical garden in the middle of the sanctuary. So once this habitat is done and dusted, the total that we're going to be at in terms of animals is going to be 4. We are a third of the way through the animals that are going to be in this sanctuary. Can't believe it. And like I say, we're 10 episodes in. So this is probably going to be about 40 episodes long, maybe, because I do want to do some like other miscellaneous episodes on some other bits. I don't want it to just be like an episode per animal per se. And onto the restaurant floor plan. Originally, I was going to do sort of like a 2 wide and then 4 or 5 long hallway, but it was way too small and I didn't really like the look of it. So ended up sort of just extending it out a little bit. And you see where it sort of like dips in on the right hand side there, that little right angle bit. I end up deleting that, rotating the wall and making it so that it's like flush to the actual main building itself. Then I just start playing around with a few elements. So I've used these like the stalls that are in the game for the restaurants. Please, I wish Frontier would add some like normal tables and chairs. Like you've got the round ones which have like nice chair designs, but I just want like a normal rectangular table, or maybe even like a square table with 2 chairs at it. It just looks normal, you know. I don't always feel like you have to be going with this like Americanized like stall diner experience type thing. Yeah, that's kind of like my one gripe with the restaurants. I do wish that they would add like a bit more variety to them. But at least they're flexi color, and that's the main thing at the end of the day. So I'm able to like change them to give them the color palette that I want. And then I separate them with the conservation beams so that they're not like back to back completely to each other. The exterior wall where the lions are actually going to be residing is going to be like wooden logs as opposed to like stone or anything like that. This is mainly because I think the logs are like sort of more safer for the lions, rather than having like stone that they could like, I don't know, chew out and gnaw at. Because the Indonesian stone wall pieces, like when you look at them, you know that if they were like an actual piece that you could physically touch in real life, like you'd know that they'd be like a little bit sharp potentially after a little bit of wear and tear. But this window I mucked around with quite a lot. I just really wanted to get like a nice height in terms of like, if you're sitting in these chairs, I want the lion to be like taller than you when you're sitting down, just so it gives them like a sense of scale and grandeur, if you know what I mean. If you were looking down on it, I feel like it's not quite as majestic, or maybe even not so much intimidating, because you don't want to be intimidated by these creatures at the end of the day. So I just wanted to give it that scale where you felt the like how big and powerful these like actual like these creatures actually are. And I think I managed to get a nice little balance in the end. Like I say, this walkway that I've placed out and laid out here initially ends up being such a pain in the ass to deal with, like actually, but we end up making it work in the end. And then on the right hand side here, or the left hand side, sorry, as you come into the main restaurant dining area, we've got this raised platform area. I soon realised that if you were sitting on the other side of the dining hall, you probably wouldn't have as good a view of the lions as those sitting completely adjacent to the window. So my way of countering that was to make the other side of the dining hall raised up. Basically what this does is means that you might not get the best view of them as they walk along the platform, but you can see over the top of the people sitting against the window and see there's two sort of islands I've made just behind the walking platform that you can't quite see yet. You'll get a sort of better idea of them when I start building the actual habitat itself, but you get a better view of those portions when you're sitting on these raised terraced areas. But even if you're sitting up on those terraced areas, what I've done is by the window there, I've missed out a seating area bit. Basically, I just want this to like be a small viewing area. So while you're waiting for your food, you can get up and maybe go and stand by the window and take a picture or something like that. Just so it gives like an interactive element to this whole restaurant and you're not just sort of tied to your chairs. Obviously, the guests won't physically get up and move around because of how this area has been designed. Guests will only be in this area to sit in these seats where they get teleported in and then they'll teleport out once they've finished eating. The vibe I wanted to go with for this whole area as well was I wanted it to be quite open, but at the same time I don't want it to feel too like too open, because I think when you have a big space that you need filling, when you need to then fill it with stuff, it's a bit it is a bit of a pain. So yeah, I hope I've managed to hit a happy medium with it there, and then I end up like just changing the shape of the room as well, just so it's not a completely like square or rectangular room. And then I add in these like stairs here, and then I had something similar on the other side as well and make some rails for them. Just remembering to rotate the beams so that they're not a repeating pattern and something that you can spot easily as you're walking around. But yeah, it's not made to cater many people, but I guess that's the whole sanctuary as a whole. Like I say, the whole point is that you pre-book as part of groups, stay in the lodges. There's not really going to be many opportunities that the sanctuary will be open in terms of like people buying admission tickets for the day. So, and even then, not everyone's going to be in here eating at the same time. So, and there will be like small, I think I'll add some like small huts around the place as well, where people can like maybe get food on the go. But I'm not sure whether that's something that you'd actually want to technically encourage. You know, when you're in this area, you're like, it's a dedicated eating area. But I don't know whether I'd want to encourage people eating as they walk around the sanctuary because of the temptation to maybe feed the animals when they shouldn't be. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave the footage to run in the background and just ramp the music up a tiny bit. And what I will do is I will rejoin you when we get to the line habitat portion of this build. If you want to skip forward to that, then please feel free to. But this is going to be me detailing and finishing sort of the main structure of the restaurant itself. Okay, I am back and we are on to the lion exterior. This bit I had an idea in mind. So at the start you might have seen me sort of chisel out this like mini chasm in the middle. The idea being is I want to fill this with like rocks and upside down elephant grass just to try and force the lion to use the walkway as much as possible. Again, it would have been pointless me having the walkway if it meant that the lion could just jump over the top of it or walk across the chasm. So I really wanted to try and sort of like encourage that behavior as much as I possibly could. And then I ended up using the mesh areas from the cougar habitat just to help separate this up. Again, the bit leading out on this side where this window is, this is going to be where the main yard is going to be, and it will have like a wider habitat that you'll be able to see the lion pride roaming around in. This side here is purely going to be for obviously just people who are sitting in the restaurant, but at no point am I going to force the lions to be in one section or the other. They're going to have free reign to be able to move between the two areas as they want. Here my retaining walls come over. Again, if the sanctuary was happy with the work that the contractors did the first time around, there's absolutely no reason why they wouldn't want to use them again if they know that they're reliable and something that is actually somewhat affordable. While I'm messing around with all this mesh in the background, the mesh itself does actually need a little bit of adjusting. The walkway that is suitable for cougars is too small for lions, so you do see me adjust that a little bit later on so that I can get the lions through. At the end of this video, there is quite a bit of me messing around with traversable area, trying to get it so that the lions would walk across the habitat. And in here, just add in the mesh on the other side. This is going to be where the keepers are able to get in and out, and then I'll attach an adjacent building where the lions are basically going to be able to sort of sleep if they want to. Again, I wanted to try and put as much on this right hand side as possible so that I could encourage the lions to actually use the walkway. So I think this is where the main feeding area is going to be for the lions, and then what I'll do is I'll do like a talk point for the lions as well on the main yard, because that will act as another way of the lions being able to be fed, so that I don't have to worry about them not getting any food if they're on the other side of the habitat. But yeah, it's sort of been made to sort of cheese this walkway as much as humanly possible, really. In the background, I've got rock work going on. This is going to be more of a dry palette in terms of what you see me do for the other habitats. Again, I don't really want all these habitats to feel like the same. So I have been mixing up a little bit with the foliage palette this round and the rock work. It has its own USP, this area, obviously, because you can sit in the restaurant and view the lions while you go, but I have to then remember that this is going to be stretching out onto like a further yard, so I have to bear that in mind. But I'm using as much of this dry foliage as I possibly can. And some of this dry foliage is really good nowadays. You know, a lot of the things like the buffalo grass, the dry blue stem and stuff like that. This is all stuff that's like relatively new-ish to the game, and I would hate to imagine what it would have been like doing this habitat if I didn't have access to a lot of this stuff. They're not technically considered acceptable plants by the lion, but again, I'm just gonna go off the assumption that this is grass that has been here for a long time. It's already in the sanctuary before the sanctuary even turned up, and that the lions just over time have sort of maybe, I don't know, it might sound a bit disgusting, but urinated on the grass and made it go yellow or something. I don't know, but yeah, over time that this grass has just sort of gone yellow, probably because of the, well, God knows what. But yeah, I just wanted it to look a bit different. I didn't want to use the same palette that I've been using throughout the whole sanctuary, because otherwise, like I say, areas end up feeling a bit samey, and this kind of will blend in nicely to the caracals and the sandcats when I end up using them as well. Here I'm just ripping the cougar building out. I do end up shrinking this down, even though it's ironic. This building is going to be made to house 4 lions, 1 male and 3 females, but I end up shrinking it down just because it doesn't really feel like there's too much room between the main restaurant building and the bit behind where the keeper can get through. So here you see me like take out a chunk of the wall and then just like put it across, and I think that ends up looking quite nice in terms of the spacing. And then there's just attaching the mesh again so that I can do the fence, and then I end up putting like a mock fence in because I put a line in just to start messing around with the traversable area and see whether I could get this looking working functionally as well as looking nice at the same time. I end up adding these like beams in as like maybe mini supports, kind of my biggest mistake with the whole thing, because it turns out that they impede on the traversable area. So I end up like removing quite a few of these, or moving them so that they wouldn't really work as supports. Here I'm adding the elephant grass underneath the ground as well, just so that the lions can't walk across, but it does turn out that they can jump across, so I have to try and address that best I can. And then this is like my mock null fence, just to get the lions in and test it out so that it's functional. Testing habitats as I go is something that I have thankfully gotten into the habit of. There was a time in my Planet Zoo career, as it were, that I would go in, build a whole habitat, then put the animals in at the end, and it turned out that the main key element of my habitat that I wanted just didn't function correctly, and the whole habitat was redundant and useless. So I'm glad I've managed to sort of change my ways in that regard. Here I'm just adjusting the sizes of the doorways. The lion can then get indoors here with the adjustment to that, and then the mesh was a little bit more finicky because you've got all these different size mesh pieces without them like clipping outside of the framework where they should be based. It is worth noting, at the time of me doing this voiceover and finishing the recording for this section, the doorway on the other side is still the old size for the cougars, so I am going to have to like copy this piece of fence and like put it across the other side. But given that that part is still in its theory crafting stage, it really doesn't matter if it's the same size, because I might need to adjust it anyway. Nothing too interesting going on in the background here, just me messing around with different size beam pieces just so that nothing is like over clipping where it should be. And then here you can see that the gates are now both functional. I end up changing it so that the framework of the windows as well is non-climbable, because the lions would have just phased through it. And you can see that you've got these like weird blue floating patches where the lions will just basically jump across. And that's not what I want. I want them using this walkway as much as I possibly can. So here's me just like moving these pegs or posts, thinking that that was what was causing the issue. And then when I put them back in, it turns out they still wouldn't use it. So at this point I was starting to get a little bit frustrated, because when you look at it, it looks wide enough. But again, you have to remember that traversable area in Planet Zoo is dictated by the length of the animal as well as the width. So widthways, an animal like the animal like lion would be able to easily walk across this, but it can't turn 360 degrees on the spot against the window, because it's just simply not wide enough to space. And then I think this is about as close as I could get it, really. You end up with this like weird little gap between the ramp and the end of the walkway, but as long as the walkway is functional, I think that's really kind of that's going to be the only thing that really matters to me. Just the idea that you can sit against the window and the lion will walk across. The last thing I want is the janky jumping animations happening while people are sort of sitting there trying to enjoy this area for what it's supposed to be. This log here is supposed to be an attempt at me stopping them from jumping across, but alas, you can see it was pointless. It serves absolutely no purpose in terms of stopping that. So a bit more foliage to try and stop it, and then I end up sticking a mini cork tree at the back, which stops them jumping across. Well, I say cork tree, it's actually like one of the small olive trees in the end. But yeah, I'm just trying everything I possibly can to make it so that they can't jump across, but also make it not look absolutely hideous. I realised I could just put a fence across here, but a fence just would not look very nice. So I'm opting with like the Planet Zoo logs and stuff like that. And then I just put some enrichment in just to entice them in. Again, this bit on the right hand side here is going to be the main feeding area, and in here I get my first glimpse of them trying to actually use the walkway. So I'm just like going into Ansel and messing around there. That's something I do quite a lot, but I do cut it out in my videos. But I left this one on this occasion purely because it was an example of the lion using the walkway, which was really exciting to see the hard work pay off in the end, and it was sort of the main part of the vision and the dream when I was making this habitat. But this is going to be sort of me wrapping up the habitat section of this. I just end up adding like a few more enrichment items. I put some of the sleeping beds down so that I could try and get them to maybe like lay down in front of the window for guests as well. And then I end up adding some like decal pieces to act as like just general dirt basically, and also to color up where the panels sort of like clip into each other, and you end up with like weird like right angles where the panels don't quite join up correctly, and then something against the window just to help bridge that weird little gap that I've got appearing there as well. But now we're jumping on back on into the interior, and I start messing around with the height of the roof because I come to the realization that I'm going to have to do the roof eventually. This bit here is just going to be me decorating the part between the in front of the left wing here. I put this piece of concrete down, but then ultimately decided that it's kind of pointless having it there, and then I just put a load of foliage and then an oak tree just to block it all off. I want this to be its own little section. I don't want you to be able to like loop around or anything like that. This is going to be completely cut off so that you have to go back past the gift shop and around the back if you want to go further beyond. And yeah, so this is just like me tidying up this whole area, bringing everything together so that this left wing merges with the main building, bringing all the beams across, copying the windows across. But ultimately the exterior is kind of barren and plain, but that's kind of how I wanted it to be. Really, you're not really going to be seeing much of this stuff behind the blanket of foliage that I end up posting. And then the exterior is just going to be like these log wall pieces and panels. Like I say, this habitat's probably going to be like extending around here a little bit, so I want to keep up that sort of trend of the exterior where the lines are going to be as the logs, and then just a trim around the edge of the roof as well, just so that I can start putting in the roof. And the roof for this section is going to be flat. It's not going to be like pitched or anything like that, just because I thought that a flat roof would be a little bit easier to work with on this section, given that the angle that it's working at compared to the main building. But yeah, basically I just decorate the exterior. I put a few benches and bins down. I go on the interior, do the ceiling lights and some details there. But I think that's it. I'm going to be calling it for the voiceover portion of this episode. I will leave you with the speed build. Thank you so much for watching. Leave suggestions for the name of this down in the comments below. Like I say, the Lion Inn is going to be a temporary name. I don't think it's going to be something that I end up sticking with. But enjoy the rest of the speed build, and I will catch you in the next episode. Thank you so much again for getting me to episode number 10 in the first place. I appreciate you all. Peace out. Bye bye.